Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Autumn Lake. I'm on behalf of the Anti-War Committee. I would like to welcome all of you here today. Thank you so much for making it here despite all the nonsense we've been having to deal with outside, all the nonsense on the ground, all the wind. I appreciate you all coming out despite that on a Sunday afternoon, no less. We have a wonderful program ahead of us today, and I hope that all of you are as enthusiastic as I am about learning about the popular grassroots movements that establish the current political infrastructure in Venezuela. If you've been following the news of late, you're aware that the sovereign state of Venezuela has been in the crosshairs of the U.S.'s aggressive foreign policy for a long time, and that aggression has been ramping up in recent months. Between the U.S.'s existing sanctions, direct support of opposition movements, and influencing right-wing allies in the region, it is imperative that we, as anti-imperialists, continue to support the right of sovereignty and self-determination for the Venezuelan people. In that spirit, I'm excited to introduce our presenter today. She has lived and worked in Venezuela since 2004 as a documentary filmmaker and activist in community media with the National Association of Community Free and Alternative Media, and popular feminism with Movimiento Mujeres por la Vida. She is currently a member of the English language website VenezuelaAnalysis.com as an audio-visual reporter. Everyone, please welcome Katrina Kozarek.
Thank you so much for all coming out today. I know the weather isn't the best. It's not the worst either. I really appreciate Anti-War Coalition, the Anti-War Committee for organizing this event, for all your work in inviting people to come out today to learn a little bit more about Venezuela. As Adam said, I've been living in Venezuela for the last 15 years. I've been working with many grassroots movements. And part of the intention of today is to give a different perspective about what's going on the ground in Venezuela. And I wanted to start out with an excerpt from the film. It's actually a film that's 76 minutes long. We're only going to watch 46 minutes. I cut out certain parts. It was made in 2003. And a lot of things in it are somewhat outdated because so many things have happened in Venezuela since 2003, but it is very current because it shows, one, what the political philosophy is behind the Bolivarian revolution and how it sprung up really from the grassroots. It's not something that came from the top down. Chavez wasn't the inventor of the Bolivarian revolution, rather it was something that sprang up from the people, even from the 1980s. And then developed into a whole political project and the possibility to really create some profound social and political transformations within the country. And then talk a little bit about the communes, which are one of the most, which is a recent development in Venezuela, more or less since 2010. It is a proposal for radical democracy that could possibly change the entire democratic system as we know it. Instead of being a party system, the possibility to have radical, direct, participatory democracy. So I will start out with the excerpt. Like I said, it's 46 minutes. You can take a pause if there are any questions or anything else that we'd like to discuss about the film, and then we'll go on to talk about the communes. Any parallels between what happened in 2002 in Venezuela and what is happening now, which is also an orchestrated coup against the Bolivarian government in Venezuela and also against the people who have been working hard to create a new political system and social change in Venezuela, is not a coincidence. So I invite you to watch the film, and if you have any questions, you can address them after it's over.
Ellos quieren el petróleo y quieren el agua, por favor. ¿Pero qué va?
¿Hasta cuándo nos poníamos la salida pensando que los viste? ¡El pueblo despertó!
¡Estados Unidos, chao! ¡Ni no te conozco!
¡Viva la revolución! Hay que pensar que un pueblo no lo para nadie.
La revolución bolivariana como revolución engendrada desde abajo, desde la insurrección de sujetos desde abajo, tanto militares como populares, ha venido creando al menos las condiciones, ¿verdad?, del debate teórico, del ejercicio político, de las prácticas para poder visualizar caminos que confronten abiertamente lo que es el neoliberalismo.
Venezuela, de verdad, y a todos los países, y a todos. Esta pelea no es de Chávez, esta pelea es del pueblo.
La revolución bolivariana nos da una base de apoyo, ¿verdad?, para poder pensar y visualizar la revolución latinoamericana. Es decir, la revolución latinoamericana ya no se puede hacer sobre el modelo cubano, por ejemplo, más sí se puede hacer sobre el modelo bolivariano, ¿ya? Pero el modelo bolivariano hay que seguir creándolo, ¿bien? El modelo bolivariano no es un modelo acabado, no es un modelo soviético, no es un modelo atrapado sobre una teoría, una teleología de la historia ya cerrada, digamos, ¿verdad? O sea, la revolución bolivariana en ese sentido apenas está comenzando.
Y esto que está pasando ahorita es igualito, lo hacen 14 años cuando hubo el Caracas. Igualito. Y cuando eso no estaba Chávez. Entonces...
Bueno, para mí la Cuarta Guerra Mundial se inició en Caracas el 27 de febrero de 1989. Todo un país inició una acción de confrontación violenta y directa con las políticas del Fondo Monetario Internacional y mantuvo esa rebelión durante 5 días al costo de millares de muertos. Es decir, ese día se abrió una nueva guerra.
Y mira, no solamente fue aquí en Caracas, fue en Brasil, en Perú. Los alzamientos se empezaron a producir en diferentes partes, porque una vez que cae la cortina de hierro, el capitalismo creía que ellos habían tomado el mundo porque ya no existía Unión Soviética. Sin embargo, entonces somos los pobres, es la gente pobre, es la gente humilde la que le está diciendo a ellos, a los grandes intereses, que nosotros tenemos también posibilidades de decirles que no nos las vamos a calar.
Cuando Carlos Andrés Pérez gana en 1988, toma el poder a principios del 89, entregó la soberanía al país en un paquete económico, llamado paquete económico, en el cual, bueno, la nación sometía a las condiciones del paquete su tributación, accedía a no desarrollar un conjunto de políticas sociales, ¿no? Accedía a la privatización de una gran cantidad de empresas, etc. Y entonces, y sobre todo, liberó, como se dice ahora, los precios.
Entonces había subido la gasolina, había subido el pasaje y la gente no tenía con qué pagarlo. O sea, neoliberal, absolutamente neoliberal. Él quería masacrar a este pueblo por su estómago.
¿Qué es lo que quiere que pase a esta gente? ¿Cómo se muere el hambre? No es así. Que bajen todos los precios. Cuando bajen todos los precios, usted queda tranquilo.
Es la falta del aumento de salario, porque dijeron que era un 30% aumento de salario y es absolutamente incierto, porque lo que está aumentando es un 10%.
La gente bajó porque ya estaba obstinada, pues. De tanto engaño, de tanta miseria, de tanta mierda.
Era un movimiento que no fue convocado por ninguna huelga de CTV, ni de partido, ni de gobierno. Fue hecho por el pueblo. Es el movimiento más profundo, socialmente hablando, que ha habido en América. privada como si la cuestión no los indígenas. Eso sí ha tenido profundidad el 27 de febrero, en su totalidad.
Una sublevación popular que fue reprimida sangrientamente con un costo de posiblemente millares de víctimas. Todavía no se ha logrado saber cuántas fueron.
Dirige a la nación el ciudadano presidente de la República, señor Carlos Andrés Pérez. Venezolano. El 16 de febrero de este mismo año me dirigí a la nación para señalar las medidas que habrían de tomarse para rescatar las posibilidades de desarrollo y de bienestar a las cuales tenemos los derechos y grandes posibilidades todos los venezolanos.
El único que voy que dice que es democracia la vida, nosotros en la calle no valga nada. No somos reprimidos. Aquí no hay represión.
Los derechos todos los venezolanos.
Inocente que mataron ese 27 de febrero, ¿por qué? Por un amigo gobierno, que no paga nadie. Todo hecho que hace poco muertos quedaron en la calle agregado y nadie lo mató, matándolo del mismo gobierno. ¿Cuántos familiares no hay ahorita pidiendo que abran las cosas esas que hay para ver si consiguen su familiar? No hay ni 235 miles de personas inocentes que murieron bajo ese problema.
Después lo está pasando el hambre, después no aguanta más. Después no aguanta más chantaje, más burla y más engaño.
Lo que pasó el 27 no es nada comparado con lo que puede volver a suceder. Porque el pueblo está cansado, ¿ves? El pueblo está cansado de tanta mentira, de tantas cosas que pasan, que los chivos grandes lo que hacen es llevarse todo para afuera y el pueblo muriéndose de hambre.
Si el pueblo se une todo, Venezuela tiene que salir adelante, porque si no, no.
El pueblo se está preparando más. Calladito por debajo se está preparando. Calladito por debajo se está preparando.
Al 27 de febrero, que generó inevitablemente elementos políticos, militares y sociales que todavía siguen influyendo y que no han concluido. Es decir, ahí nació un verdadero poder constituyente. Y luego viene el 4 de febrero, allí es donde aparece Chávez.
El para entonces teniente coronel Hugo Chávez Frías dirige un lanzamiento militar fallido.
Compañeros, lamentablemente por ahora los objetivos que nos planteamos no fueron logrados en la ciudad capital. Ustedes lo hicieron muy bien por allá, pero ya es tiempo de evitar más derramamiento de sangre, ya es tiempo de reflexionar y vendrán nuevas situaciones y el país tiene que enrumbarse definitivamente hacia un destino mejor. Así que oigan mi palabra, oigan al comandante Chávez que les lanza este mensaje para que por favor reflexionen y se pongan las armas, porque ya en verdad los objetivos que nos hemos trazado a nivel nacional es imposible que los logremos. Les agradezco su lealtad, les agradezco su valentía, su desprendimiento, y yo ante el país y ante ustedes asumo la responsabilidad de este movimiento militar bolivariano. Muchas gracias.
No hay condena popular, más bien hay grandes manifestaciones de apoyo popular a los militares que están detenidos en ese momento.
¡Viva el sistema de
su carrera política Rafael Caldera y luego le dio la presidencia del indulto a Hugo Chávez Frías.
Y la gente venciendo el miedo, siguiendo los ideales del Libertador, de echemos el miedo a la espalda y salvemos la patria, hicimos un proceso que se llamaba Marcha Venezuela, con el comandante Hugo Chávez como candidato presidencial. Empezaron a satanizar.
Una candidatura que sería arrasada en la elección del 6 de diciembre si nos ponemos de acuerdo los venezolanos de conciencia democrática para elegir un gobierno que valga la pena.
Nadie más que Alfaro puede derrotar al candidato del odio y la violencia.
Está renaciendo el terror al pueblo mediante esa venta, ese marketing del miedo. Se está intentando volver a esa idea. El venezolano es una bestia feroz, es un ser que hay que tenerlo adormilado con las consignas de la democracia o de la cacocracia formal, porque si de verdad lo dejamos que intervenga en la política, quién sabe qué va a hacer.
Durante su campaña lo que hizo fue prometer cambios, una revolución pacífica y democrática al pueblo venezolano, cambios de una democracia representativa por una democracia participativa, cambios de los esquemas del Estado, de las estructuras del Estado, y prometió también involucrar al pueblo en un proceso constituyente que es el poder originario del pueblo. Participamos en las elecciones y el resultado, bueno, todo el mundo lo conoce.
El nuevo presidente de los venezolanos es Hugo Chávez Frías, con 58.7% de la votación.
Texto constitucional en el cual todo el pueblo participó a través de foros, discusiones, asambleas, foros abiertos, charlas por internet.
Los sectores sociales que tienen el poder real, que no el poder político.
El pueblo vota por la Constitución.
¡Y ya murió! ¡Y ya murió! ¡La moribunda!
Cómo abrirle cauce entre todos al gran poder revolucionario que aquí se desató desde hace más de una década, una vez más, porque esto tiene tiempo, le decía yo a ellos anoche, hablando en Palacio. Esta pelea nuestra tiene 500 años, pues. Sí, tenemos 500 años batallando contra los imperios del mundo.
La civilización capitalista no respeta los derechos humanos. ¿Cómo se asienta aquí Europa sobre América y el Caribe? Con 80 millones de muertos.
Indígena. Hemos visto este proceso revolucionario, este proyecto político, como un proyecto de vida.
Yo como indígena tengo el valor de defender esta patria a como dé lugar. Si es posible dar mi vida, como mis antepasados lo hicieron. Defiendo toda la raza humana y no estoy a favor de las intervenciones extranjeras. Y a la vez, yo prefiero morir con las botas puestas y no vivir arrodillado toda mi vida, el resto de mi vida, para por no haber hecho algo hoy.
Aquí hubo civilizaciones antes de que el almirante Colón ayudara e iniciara la globalización, que no es nada nuevo, solo que ahora tiene computadoras.
Ese proceso de globalización, bueno, se quiere repetir en lo macro cuando se quiere que se combate es la diversidad. Nosotros podemos hacer un continente fuerte cuando se reconoce pues la diversidad de cultura, la diversidad de pensamiento, la diversidad de tecnología, y no tenemos por qué solo tomar una tecnología y tomar un solo idioma y un solo vestido y un solo modo de ser. Estamos en contra de eso y no estamos dispuestos pues a desaparecer, ese es nuestro lema.
Nosotros queremos es paz, eso sí, paz con dignidad. No la paz de los galeones, de los esclavos que traían amarrados de nuestra hermana África. No la paz de los indígenas amarrados y secuestrados. No la paz de los sepulcros, la paz de la vida, la paz de la justicia, la paz de la dignidad.
Pero lo más importante de nuestra revolución es que se da un salto cualitativo en lo que es la concepción de democracia representativa, que fue lo que existió hasta el año 1998, para venir ahora a una democracia participativa en donde el propio pueblo es protagonista de su propio destino.
Cabe señalar además que nosotros nos regimos por la línea ideológica que nos plantea Simón Bolívar, Simón Rodríguez y Ezequiel Zamora. Ahora, vale decir por qué ellos tres. En el caso de Simón Bolívar, porque plantea la dignidad del pueblo y la participación de la soberanía del pueblo, que es precisamente donde reside el poder. Hablaba de la independencia de los pueblos, la unión de los países latinoamericanos. ¿Por qué Ezequiel Zamora? Porque hablaba de hombres y tierras libres, de la necesidad de que la tierra y la economía se pongan alrededor del ser humano y del ciudadano. ¿Y por qué Simón Rodríguez? Simón Rodríguez planteó la necesidad de educarnos, porque en la medida en que el ciudadano se vaya formando, allí irrevocablemente reside el éxito de que todos podamos tener y participar en un proceso que busca, como te repito, la dignificación del ser humano y la democratización de él hacia la sociedad.
Cuando planteamos el árbol de las tres raíces, Rodríguez, Zamora, Bolívar, hemos rescatado nuestra propia ideología, respetando todas las ideologías y las ideas que por el mundo son. Pero esta es la nuestra. Nadie vino aquí a imponernos ideología. Es nuestra ideología.
Yo lo apoyo porque es beneficioso para el pescador artesanal.
Estos son los modelos de calle sombrero.
La profesora arrastre, la arrastradora, acabando con todo, la especie más chiquita se la llevaba, la especie pequeña no se reproducía.
Le quita por putada a la pesca industrial que estaba destruyendo los mares y hambriando al pueblo.
Se quitó.
Esta es la bicha del pescador.
Hemos tenido acceso a algo que era imposible antes, que era los créditos, la broma. Ahora estamos con un pie más hacia el progreso. Nosotros hemos conseguido pescado que con la lancha de arrastre han sacado de aquí de esta costa de aquí de estos pueblos, y gracias a Dios que el presidente puso esa ley que gracias a Dios nos ha ido muy bien. Se adueñaron de la gran cantidad de tierras aquí, hermano. Aquí las tierras estaban en manos de unos poquitos, de ese yugo que teníamos aquí, que era de una clase poderosa, de una clase que tenía los consorcios a nivel internacionales, con sus focos aquí nacionales, y no hacían nada. Eran tierras que no estaban productivas.
capaz de producir alimentos para la gente. Nosotros aquí, en pequeña escala, estamos demostrando que sí se puede.
Hoy nuestras tierras, a través de las cooperativas, pasan a ser tierras productivas.
Porque una cooperativa es una comunidad asociativa que piensa más en el bien colectivo, dependiendo de la cantidad de socios que tenga, pero también piensa en el bien colectivo de una comunidad.
Así hemos tenido varios ya beneficios, donde es el agua, la luz, las placas, la sanitización de los bucos, la vivienda.
Tierras como esta estaban ociosas, pero hoy es aquella siembra establecida. Esto es comida para nuestros niños y para los niños de afuera del mundo. Entonces, cuando hablamos de la democracia participativa y protagónica, bueno, es participativa. Nos reunimos, debatimos y le llevamos propuestas de cómo debe ser en lo que respecta al sector campesino. Nosotros queremos que esto sea así, que los ministerios tales o cuales funcionen de tal manera.
Chicos, ahí en Caracas se bomba y nosotros aquí jodiéndolos por la tierra, que los maten nuestra gente.
Contamos con nosotros mismos. Nosotros mismos tenemos que organizar y tenemos que armarnos nosotros mismos.
Esa es una propuesta que propuso un grupo tupamaro. Vamos a tomar, mira, flor de verdad, chico, porque mira que se está mamando gallo arrechamente a nuestra gente. Y ahí lo decía, más hacerlo todos a los arrechos, a los campesinos, a los checheños, a los venezolanos y a los bolivarianos. Eso es todo.
Sabemos que entre el medio de Chávez y del pueblo en sí, que todavía queda mucho, ¿vale?, de la burocracia del pasado, pero que son procesos que el pueblo los va a ir limpiando.
Y no vamos a permitir la globalización que ellos han querido imponer, donde los Estados Unidos es quien financia a esos terrófagos y que quiere que apoderarse no solamente de Venezuela, sino de los países latinoamericanos que están librando una fuerte lucha.
El proceso bolivariano nos permite enfrentar al ALCA, a la OMC, al Fondo Monetario Internacional, al banco, a los transgénicos, donde podemos proteger la naturaleza, los animales, que podamos asegurar la alimentación. Todo eso está planteado en nuestra Constitución Bolivariana de Venezuela.
Desde Washington, el secretario de Estado norteamericano, Colin Powell, expresó su preocupación por ciertas acciones del presidente de Venezuela.
We have been concerned with some of the actions of Venezuelan President Chavez and his understanding of what democratic system is all about.
Estaremos informando a ustedes sobre la situación de Caracas y del resto del país con este paro nacional.
El objetivo del paro es protestar contra las leyes inhabilitantes, en especial la ley de tierra.
Nuestra actuación no tiene ninguna intención desestabilizadora. Es el ejercicio responsable y democrático del deber que siente el empresariado de hacer frente a una situación preocupante.
A nosotros nos importa un comino lo que diga el presidente de la República, lo que diga el presidente del CNE, lo que diga el propio Tribunal Supremo de Justicia.
Una conspiración de parte de sectores que perdieron privilegios en el país, dentro de los medios de comunicación, dentro de los grandes grupos económicos, sectores como Fedecámara, como la cúpula sindicalera del país, como la CTV, la cúpula eclesiástica. Todos esos sectores se beneficiaron de 50 años de falsa democracia.
La dictadura de un hombre.
¿El presidente de la República está loco?
Unas declaratorias de insanidad mental del presidente de la República.
Un loquito.
Están llamando a un cacerolazo en contra del gobierno del presidente Hugo Chávez.
Poco a poco, él con sus mensajes tipo Robin Hood, que le iba a quitar un grito para llevarse a los pobres, mira, o sea, la gente se agarró de eso y empezó a apoyarlo. Bueno, me opongo a Hugo Chávez porque su simpatía hacia el régimen comunista ha impedido que nosotros ejerzamos los derechos que nos corresponden por naturaleza, nos ha obligado a salir a la calle y reclamar lo que es nuestro.
Estamos medio comiendo, no estamos ni comiendo ni lo que comíamos antes, porque vamos al automercado y a veces tenemos que contar los víveres porque no nos alcanza el dinero. Y a los venezolanos eso nos ha afligido muchísimo, porque no estamos acostumbrados a vivir así como él quiere que vivamos como los cubanos.
Ha creado la división
división social en Venezuela, ha creado el odio y el rencor entre los venezolanos, algo que no existía en nuestro país.
En la medida que los ricos tengan más plata y haya más inversión, los pobres van a estar mejor. Yo sí estoy de acuerdo con que los medios hagan toda la publicidad posible para que ese señor salga de aquí.
A la miseria, al hambre, al desempleo, a la inflación.
Vamos a pegar esto porque este programa se puede ver en el mundo entero.
Aquí hubo un despilfarro durante 40 años. Aquí hubo violencia durante 40 años. Aquí se asesinó a dirigentes deportivos, culturales, y no había sociedad civil que criticara eso. ¿Ustedes no se acuerdan de eso? Hay que tener memoria.
Lo que ocurre aquí es que ha llegado al poder, empujado por un proceso que arranca desde el 27 de febrero de 1989, un sector que tiene vinculaciones más estrechas con el movimiento popular y que la burguesía nacional no quiere que administre este Estado, que sigue siendo un Estado capitalista. Y los Estados Unidos de Norteamérica y el imperialismo sienten que le descuadra su política internacional y que no le aplica los planes económicos que tienen previstos, por lo menos a pie juntillas. Entonces aquí se ha generado una confrontación que es parte de eso, pues, de una lucha de clase. Y se expresa a través de este fenómeno de la revolución bolivariana.
Por eso no puede ser que los que nos engañaron, que a Venezuela robaron, hoy no quieran defender.
No puede ser. Es para que se den cuenta que Chávez no está solo. Chávez está con nosotros. Nosotros estamos con Chávez. Porque no vayan a sacar a Chávez para que venga un gobierno aquí, para que privatice la salud, para privatice la educación y para privatizar a PDVSA. Y nosotros el pueblo no lo podemos aceptar eso.
Que le tengan miedo al pueblo, no a la persona chavista.
Lo que nos están con Chávez son los que tienen real, porque el problema no es Chávez, el problema somos nosotros.
Y es pacífico, de toda la vida, tenemos 40 años de ser pacíficos. Nuestra arma es la Constitución y ellos lo saben, pero si nos encontrarán en la calle, porque basta ya.
Sencillo, la verdad la oposición no son ellos, son los títeres. ¿De quiénes? De la gente que fuera del país está pendiente de agarrar las riquezas energéticas que hay en nuestro país.
Obviously, Venezuela is important because they're their largest supplier of petroleum. I would say that Mr. Chavez, from the State Department, they say this probably doesn't have the interests of the United States at heart.
Es decir, lo que se está debatiendo en Venezuela es saber de quién va a ser el petróleo venezolano.
Estados Unidos importa hoy 6 de cada 10 barriles que quema diariamente. Y no es poca cosa. Estados Unidos quema 1 de cada 2 litros de gasolina mundial.
The U.S. has mostly supported one or another kind of dictator, often very brutal and vicious one, while American corporations enrich themselves with Venezuelan resources, as did a sector of Venezuelan society. I mean, there's a wealthy sector, to tell you, but most of the population is left out.
Los gobiernos que pasaron ya no tenían corazón. Por su mente les pasaba solo discriminación. El rico en el medio del recibo y el pobre en el rincón. El pobre comía sardina y el rico chicharrón. El pobre encima del cerro y el rico en urbanización.
Nosotros venezolanos queremos ir en Norteamérica, que por más que se esconda, sabemos que él está detrás de todas estas cosas. Queremos libertad, queremos pueblo, queremos ser libres por siempre. Norteamérica, right?
Han sido despedidos de sus cargos. Ya está bueno. La siguiente persona. Eddie Ramírez, señor Juan Fernández, Horacio Medina, Carmen Elisa Hernández. Muchísimas gracias por su trabajo y por su servicio.
El Departamento de Estado de los Estados Unidos manifestó su preocupación por el clima que vive Venezuela.
All of us are going going to be watching very closely to see what goes on in Venezuela and with President Chavez in particular.
Se dice que esta es la segunda nacionalización o la verdadera nacionalización de PDVSA, porque la habíamos nacionalizado para dejarla en manos de una junta directiva que desaparecen sin dar explicaciones cerca de 40.000 millones de dólares al año. No es una cifra así como que uno pueda dejarla pasar sin hacerse por lo menos una pregunta. Lo que está sucediendo en Venezuela es que los venezolanos nos hicimos esa pregunta y nos ha reventado una especie de bomba en la cara, pues.
Señor presidente, aquí la causa de todo esto, usted váyase. Entonces será tomando tendrá que asumir esa posición, porque si no, alguna va a asumir.
So what they're probably trying to do is to instigate some kind of a military coup that'll overthrow him and restore the previous system, which is what elites in the United States call democracy.
It's so true.
Venezolanos, todos a la calle. El jueves 11 a las 10 de la mañana, marchemos todos unidos por Venezuela.
Casi todos los muertos recibieron los disparos en el área de la cabeza y el cuello. En este edificio actuaron por lo menos 3 francotiradores. El resguardo policial se triplicó, pero las armas de los círculos bolivarianos eran más potentes.
Un dictador, pero un asesino. Fuerzas Armadas, por favor, actúen. Hemos decidido dirigirnos al pueblo venezolano para desconocer el actual régimen de gobierno y la autoridad de Hugo Rafael Chávez Frías.
En el caso del 11, 12 y 13 hubo un show montado mediáticamente, un show golpista, un show donde el golpe estaba absolutamente montado en el espectáculo mediático. Ya tenían preparado la cantidad de muertos, ya sabían exactamente, traían a la gente al escenario, que era Miraflores, y allí iban a garantizar los muertos que les permitían justificar ante el mundo el golpe de Estado.
Tenían francotiradores en el Hotel Edén, aquel hotel que está allá.
Los francotiradores dispararon a algunas personas de aquel lado, pero la mayoría fue la gente que estaba de este lado, que estaba encima, estaba en Miraflores por la avenida Urdaneta y en el puente de Yagún.
Fue cuando empieza la masacre, que sube la ballena, los policías se reflejan por todas las esquinas, por todas las aceras.
Estaba aquí la ballena de la Policía Metropolitana y un grupo de policías metropolitanos disparando con arma larga a la gente que estaba acá debajo del puente. La gente intentó acercarse y enfrentar a la policía disparó con arma larga y empezaron a caer los muertos.
Sale la gente de nosotros de este lado a dispararle a la policía metropolitana, porque si no salen ellos, bueno, a nosotros no nos terminan de rematar allá abajo. Los heridos llegamos muertos ahorita.
¿Cómo dispara? ¿Cómo ¿Cómo hacía la pistola?
Contra manifestantes indefensos que iban circulando por la avenida Barán.
Nunca se le disparó a marcha porque esa marcha nunca llegó hacia a estos lados.
Ellos están disparando hacia allá, justamente a donde está el autobús, que es donde estaba la ballena.
Esta gente estaba a 3 cuadras. Entonces, la dirección de los que cayeron del otro lado nunca estuvo en el ángulo de tiro de la gente que estaba en el puente de Agudo. Y era, obviamente, decir, un francotirador. Sí, las declaraciones de Otonesta con que expresaban como ellos 2 horas antes de lo que había pasado ya hablaban de cuántos eran los muertos, ya habían tenido la declaración de los generales, ya todo estaba montado.
Yo tengo grabado el video donde en la prueba esa que se hizo, en esa prueba ya se habla de muertos cuando todavía no había un solo muerto en la calle. Está masacrando a personas inocentes con francotiradores. Para este momento, más de 6 muertos y decenas de heridos en Caracas.
La oposición, los francotiradores, le estaban disparando a su propia gente y a nosotros mismos, porque tenían que haber muerto de los dos lados para echarle la culpa al presidente de la República.
El gobierno de Chávez reprimió por la vía armada a manifestantes pacíficos. Ordenó a sus seguidores disparar contra gente no armada.
Le estamos dando la oportunidad porque vamos a tener que entonces hacer la operación militar.
Golpe de Estado en virtud del cual sube un empresario, el presidente de Cámara,
Presidente de la República de Venezuela,
disuelve todos los poderes.
suspende de fiscales a los diputados principales y suplentes, al presidente y demás magistrados del Tribunal, al fiscal general de la República, al defensor del pueblo, a los miembros del Consejo Nacional Electoral.
Pocas horas hay centenares de detenciones políticas.
Empezamos a pelear, si nos masacraban, bueno, efectivamente.
Son chavistas, no me pare. Aquí no queremos de pueblos humanos, aquí no es Chávez.
Hubo un gran sentimiento. La angustia de un pueblo de seguir siendo pobre, teniendo un país rico, la angustia de ver sus hijos perseguidos y muertos, la angustia de tener que verle la cara a Bush metido aquí en Venezuela, la angustia de tener que verle la cara a los ricos pisoteando tus derechos, la angustia de ver cómo disolvieron la constituyente, la constitución y todo ese proceso hermoso al cual participamos. Por supuesto, esta angustia la convertimos en rabia. Y cuando nosotros logramos convertir la angustia y la desesperación en rabia, fue cuando definitivamente decidimos volver a Miraflores y retomarlo.
Ahora es que tengo mi cédula República Bolivariana de Venezuela y la seguiré teniendo.
Y entonces hubo una cosa que es absolutamente sobresaltos cualitativos en la conciencia, sin que hubiese una dirección política, en absoluto, ningún partido de MBR, nada. La mayoría de la gente que eran los líderes de izquierda entendieron que esto era una dictadura, que iba a ser como la chilena, que mejor había que guardarse. Pero el pueblo solo estuvo absolutamente convencido de que había que defender ya y que le tenía que devolver su constitución y que le tenía que devolver su presidente y que no era posible que hicieran esto y que no creía en los medios y que no creía en esa dictadura y en todo lo que se había montado. Y de inmediato el pueblo se negó a aceptar ninguna de las verdades mediáticas.
Esto se volvió como una especie de un rugido salimos a la calle.
Sin un medio de comunicación, porque lo primero que hicieron los golpistas fue sacar a Venezolana Televisión del aire. Empezaron a comunicarse a través de los motorizados. Los motorizados iban de un lado, mira que en Fuerte Tiuna está todo el mundo allí, y se lo avisaban.
Que se montó allí, un gobierno capitalista de la oligarquía.
No podemos aceitar que esos militares traidores hayan montado a esos burgueses para que nos pisoteen nuestros derechos.
Entonces la gente tomó los fuertes militares, gritando en los fuertes militares. Empezó a tomar entonces el Palacio de Gobierno, donde estaban ahí los conspiradores y los dictadores celebrando.
Cuando ellos vieron que no podían controlar eso, que hicieron entregar nuevamente, salir huyendo como una gallina.
Salieron corriendo los fascistas de Miraflores y fue cuando la casa militar, que todavía se mantenía leal al gobierno y a la revolución, fue cuando tomó el palacio.
Mi ejército, mi pueblo, lograron reconquistar nuevamente el gobierno.
Ya todo el mundo sabía que no estábamos solos, a pesar del silencio mediático donde los medios decidieron no dar ni nada de información porque el país estaba prendido por los cuatro costados.
¿Cuánto dinero hemos repartido? ¿En qué dice la gente?
No hemos dado informaciones o transmitido imágenes que pudieran causar mayor daño a nuestro país.
La gente entonces fue a los medios a decir, digan la verdad, digan la verdad, digan la verdad.
Nuestro voto, señores, no pueden pasar por encima de nosotros, del pueblo. El pueblo, los pobres, somos la mayoría. Nosotros no nos pueden llamar turba porque usted viva en el country club. Nosotros somos el pueblo, nosotros tenemos sentimientos, nosotros tenemos corazón.
Nos dicen ustedes que la renunciaron, déjame decirles que el pueblo acepta la renuncia. No, él no nos renuncia, porque nosotros nos pusimos ahí. Él no nos va a renunciar contra mí.
Y al pueblo, lo que es del pueblo. Este pueblo ha quedado una vez más demostrado. Glorioso pueblo, el de Bolívar. Allí está para los que dudaban. Si es verdad que durante muchos años lo engañaron, lo manipularon, a veces lo llevaron como un borrego, ha quedado demostrado que ese pueblo ciertamente despertó, tomó conciencia de su propia fuerza y se ha convertido en actor histórico que construye un nuevo camino.
Lo significativo de eso es que funcionaron las redes, funcionó la voz del pueblo.
Mira, yo te digo, ellos podrán tirar 40 golpes de Estado, pero no volverán.
Estas mujeres, presidente, estas mujeres son las que se tienen que salir y dar la vida por usted y por esta revolución y por esta Venezuela. Lo hacen.
Presidente Bush, si usted quiere invadir nuestro país, bueno, se conseguirá con un pueblo que tiene en la mano una constitución y le vamos a echar plomo con una constitución. Oyón.
Es el pueblo de Bolívar y la sangre de nuestro libertador nadie la puede socavar. Este es el pueblo de Bolívar.
Nosotros definitivamente somos bolivarianos y por eso es que nosotros definitivamente creemos que esta lucha no es solamente del pueblo venezolano, esta lucha es del pueblo boliviano, del pueblo peruano, del pueblo argentino, del pueblo chileno, del pueblo palestino, del pueblo africano, del pueblo iraquí que todavía resiste contra esos modelos de opresión y que vean que sí es posible, que eso que le han impuesto a través de la propaganda, que le han impuesto los medios de comunicación diciéndole que no es posible, que eso no se puede luchar contra eso, que todo lo contrario, que sí podemos y que sí podemos.
La revolución está sembrada. Ahora tenemos que regar realmente, porque así como estamos en la revolución aquí en Venezuela, también tiene que ser mundialmente en los otros países y llegará al último rincón del mundo. Mundialmente llegará la revolución.
Of the documentary. The whole documentary is 76 minutes and it explores a few different elements. Like I said before the film started, any similarity between 2002 and what's happening right now in Venezuela is not a coincidence. It's the same kind of U.S. intervention that's happening in Venezuela right now. And it's important to note that Juan Guaidó, the self-declared president of Venezuela, which is recognized by the United States and allied countries, is from a political party called Voluntad Popular, Popular Will, which actively participated in this coup of 2002. And his political mentor, to give it a name, is Leopoldo Lopez, who participated in an attack against the Cuban embassy during the coup of 2002. So he comes from the same political lines of those who participated and actively instigated this coup in 2002. And I want to open it up to any questions if anyone has any doubts or anything or want more information.
When was the last time you were there in Venezuela, and what was the feeling, or what was the environment?
The last time I was in Venezuela, I actually left the day after the last presidential elections, which were on May 20th of 2018. It's a complicated political situation on the ground right now because there have been very intense sanctions placed on Venezuela, especially they've gotten a lot worse since 2017. But there has been a situation of economic and financial war since 2013, which has made it very difficult for many people. It's not a situation of general hunger. People aren't dying in the streets and starving. I'm sure you've seen a lot of reports on social media of reporters who have gone into the supermarkets and there's tons of food. The economic and financial situation has become extremely complex. The situation right now, though there is scarcity of certain products, especially in the poorer communities, it's been a lot more difficult to have access to foods. But there's also a situation of hyperinflation. So the food might be there, but you have to scrape together day by day just to get by. But it's not a general situation that everyone is starving. It's been difficult to have access to medicines. While the majority of the population understands that this is due to the United States sanctions against Venezuela, there's also a large portion of the population who becomes disillusioned. It's hard getting through the day by day. So some people get disillusioned and say, well, I don't care if it's the U.S. sanctions, so that just as long as Maduro's out, then I'm happy, we can have access to our food again. There are other people who simply believe that this is due to failed policies within Venezuela. So the popularity of the Bolivarian government, and Maduro in particular, has definitely gone down over the last few years. But there's still a majority of the population that does support Maduro. He was elected president with 31% of the voting population on May 20th. And that is a reflection also of the division that there is within the opposition in Venezuela. The major opposition parties like Voluntad Popular, Primero Justicia, decided to boycott the elections. They did not put up a candidate. There was opposition candidates. There was one, Javier Bertucci, which belongs to Nuvipa, which is a right-wing Christian party, and also the Alianza Progresista, Progressive Alliance, with Henry Falcón, who was Enrique Capriles in the last presidential elections. He was the opposition candidate from Primero Justicia. Henry Falcón was was his campaign advisor at the time. He is from the opposition, but he decided to run. He decided not to participate in the boycott and run in the elections, believing that as long as there are democratic, it's better to, if they want regime change, it's better to do it through democratic elections than to not participate in the elections at all. And the United States actually threatened to boycott Henry Falcón as well for participating in those elections. It was the beginning of a plan of regime change when the opposition decided not to participate in those elections. And it's also important to note that the major demand of the opposition in 2017, when there were violent protests all through the country led by the opposition, and when I say violent, I mean roadblocks, attacks at military bases. There were also very strong racist and classist undertones to these violent protests. There was one man, African-American man, who was burned alive, which is not the first time it's happened in those violent opposition protests. Also in 2014, there was another case of an African-American man in the state of Mérida who was burned alive. It also happened in the state of Lara in 2017. That one was unfortunately not caught on video, like Orlando Figuera in Caracas, but those things happen constantly during the violent protests. But one of their major demands are elections now, elections now, elections now. When they finally arrived to an international dialogue in the Dominican Republic in 2017 and 2018, they began negotiating having early elections then to give some space to the opposition to meet their demands. In January of 2018, the agreement was set. They had a date set to sign the document, and the very day of the signing of the document, the opposition did not show up, and they refused to sign the document. The government decided to go through with the elections anyway, and the opposition boycotted the elections, and this was under the advisement of the United States.
So I've heard a lot about some food shortages in Venezuela being due to hoarding of a lot of basically old guard capitalists keeping grain, keeping rice, keeping staple foods locked away. And the ironic thing to me about U.S. media lines on Venezuela is that they say that it's an example of failed socialism, which is an odd claim for a number of reasons, but at the same time, a lot of the reason that the country, from what I understand, a lot of the reason the country has survived these hoardings is because of the communal agriculture that has been providing for people. So if anything, it seems to me like these leading harder on the nationalization of the land and giving it to communities, and what people would think of as socialist production is actually the reason the country has survived at all with food production. And I know you've done a lot of work with the communes, so I was wondering if you could help me understand it in ways that are not so broad and vague.
Well, we're actually, after we finish with the question and answers, we're going to go to some videos about the communes, and specifically how those communes have resisted the economic warfare with national production, creating networks that go from raw material all the way to planned distribution and consumption within their community. So we'll see some of those concrete examples. I think Missy had a question.
Yeah, so I know that what I know of the Bolivarian Revolution is that a lot of attention is given to Chavez as being like the leader, and a lot of what people have been trying to say this whole time is like, no, it like came from the people, like the people are the reason that this happened. I was curious if you could talk at all about like the general feeling of like, so one thing I learned is that like Chavez wasn't just like being like the head of the group or whatever. The way that the Bolivarian Revolution was organized was that like people were sort of like community leaders, and that there was like a lot of like organization like from like the like bottom up basically. And I was wondering if you feel like that while you were there, that sense of it being like a community-led, grassroots movement was still kind of in place, because I mean it's been like a generation since that really took place, and like, how are the people organizing themselves? Like, are they still in charge of their own thing, or is it like, oh, we wish we had? Because I know that a lot of people aren't fans of Maduro, but it's like, it was never about Chavez or Maduro. It was like, this was like the people's revolution. Like, has that sentiment continued, or is that like sort of been lost in the
I think hardcore Chavismo and the people who are really dedicated to the Bolivarian Revolution continue to be the same, not the same, but within the same traditions of grassroots organization in Venezuela from the 1980s and the 1990s. It's definitely the same spirit. A lot of the different elements of the Bolivarian Revolution and the spaces of the historic spaces of participation that have come up during the entire Bolivarian Revolution are based on also the grassroots organizations that existed pre-revolutionary period. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when I talk about the communal councils and the communes. But the communal councils and the communes are kind of an evolution of what before were the health committees, what were the energy and water committees within the communities, the land committees that existed to fight for people's right to own land in the urban areas and also the rural areas. So there's definitely been a continuity. Chavez didn't think of these things out of the blue. They didn't simply occur to him and he wrote them down and, well, make a commune. No, it's something that had already been in progress in Venezuela. Maybe gave it a little bit more cohesion and created laws that people were able to follow to apply it, and also give it a legal standing within the country. So it created a possibility to really follow through on a national level and create a more profound change. Did you have a question?
Yeah, first off, thanks for this presentation. I didn't know very much about Venezuela, and this has really been an interesting seminar. Just a quick question about early in the film, there were some numbers that 2% of Venezuelans own 65% of the farmland, yet Venezuela still imports about 80% of their food. Are those numbers true for today, or do you know? Just wondering what the ratio is there between land ownership and how much food Venezuela is importing.
The numbers have now the rich landowners own about 43% of the land in Venezuela, okay. And there's still about 73% of the food that is being imported from the outside, according to official figures. I think during the economic war, those statistics might have changed a little bit because people have had to depend more on the resources that they have around them, the production from the countryside. It is a question that Venezuela has been dependent on an oil economy for almost 70 years now. So that's something that affects also your culture in terms of your consumption. So, you get used to using pre-cooked cornmeal to make your arepas instead of corn directly from the countryside, which is also a lot more work. You get used to eating meat that's imported from other countries, so it's been hard to change those eating habits in Venezuela, and understandably so, because it also implies a lot more work for the people. But there are several movements of campesinos, of farmers and peasants who are working to push forward the native seeds in Venezuela, especially potatoes and other kind of tuber products. They actually thrive in certain parts of Venezuela, so they're trying to push the consumption of those kind of products instead of the imported potatoes, those nice white potato, Idaho type potatoes that come from imported seeds.
That are loaded with pesticides.
Yeah.
Yes, very interesting talk, and I don't know if you know much about the Minnesota scene, but how would you compare this statement, but what you might know about the Minnesota political economy scene? There hasn't been a major consensus in Minnesota politics since the Voting Rights Act bill was passed. In this state, there's been a lot of changes going on, but that's a striking kind of lockjaw figure compared to a lot of stuff you see on the scene here.
I'm not sure I understood.
I mean, do you know much about the Minnesota political scene at all? Okay, yeah.
I've only been here since May, and taking care of some family issues, so I haven't been too involved in anything going on here in Minnesota.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about democracy from both sides,
And I see here that same kind of conversation, but not as intense. To me, having lived in South America, it seems like there's two democracies. One for the oligarchs, the bourgeoisie, and one for the working people. And there's different names thrown out for them. But when I read stuff from the National Endowment for Democracy, which is a CIA organization, it sounds beautiful, it sounds wonderful. But really, it's for the rich. Did you see an intensity in that discussion at all?
The National Endowment for Democracy, like you said, it's basically an economic branch of the CIA, and they're designed to push forward the United States vision of what democracy is. Noam Chomsky said it very well, that the United States vision of democracy, especially in other countries, looks a lot more like a dictatorship than anything else. I mean, if the United States is holding up Guaido as a democratic leader in Venezuela, Juan Guaido, someone who has absolutely no legal or legitimate right to proclaim himself president, steps up and says, "I'm president," where's the democracy? He was not elected by anyone, and there's no legal or constitutional backing that allows him to declare himself president. So what is the idea of democracy of the United States? Whoever bows down to their interests. And that's not really democracy, but that's a lot of the work that the United States has done in terms of foreign policy has been in the name of false democracy.
Just a quick question, maybe you could help. Like Guaido is claiming, oh, I'm part of the National Assembly or whatever, and so I have a right to the claim, but that's not actually what's enacted right now. And the Supreme Court says he's not. Venezuela says no, actually you have no right. So maybe that you could explain that a little bit, since the U.S. News.
Juan Guaido is a deputy in the National Assembly currently in Venezuela. He was elected in 2015. He just in January he became president of the National Assembly in Venezuela. He said his claim to legality for his self-proclamation is supposedly based on Article 233 of the Bolivarian Constitution. But if you actually read Article 233 of the Bolivarian Constitution, what it states is that an interim president can be declared only in the case of absolute absence of the current president. Maduro was elected on May 20th of 2018. He is currently president. He was sworn in on January 10th before Juan Guaido decided to declare himself interim president of Venezuela. So there is an acting president in Venezuela. Maduro has not disappeared from the scene. He's not sitting in Miraflores playing on his Xbox. He is an active president. He is an exercising president. Only in the case that the current president had not been sworn in or had not started his term would the president of the National Assembly be the interim president. But that's not the case. He was sworn in on January 10th, and Juan Guaido decided to declare himself interim president on January 23rd. In the case that Maduro was in Miraflores playing on his Xbox or decided to go to vacation somewhere else for 3 months and pay no attention to his country, since he was already sworn in, then it would be Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president of Venezuela, who would become interim president if in that case. So there is really no legal backing for him to have declared himself interim president. What they are saying as well is that he's not president because the elections in 2018, on May 20th of 2018, were totally illegitimate because Venezuela did not allow the opposition party to participate, which is false. As I had already explained, the major opposition parties decided to boycott it on their own accord. They decided not to put forth a candidate. There were 2 opposition candidates and one other candidate from the left, which is not united with the Bolivarian process. Henry Falcón and Javier Bertucci. And Maduro won those elections. And they did have international observers as well from many countries, from the Latin American Electoral Council as well, which is a very well-respected electoral organization. And they used the same electoral process, the same electoral protocol that had been used in all of the previous elections in Venezuela, the 18 electoral processes that they've had in Venezuela since the beginning of the Bolivarian Revolution. Something that Jimmy Carter, the Jimmy Carter Center, had referred to as one of the best electoral systems in the world, the best and the most transparent electoral systems in the world. The same electoral system which in 2015 elected Juan Guaido as a member of the National Assembly and managed to have an opposition majority within the National Assembly. So it's when it's convenient for the opposition, when they actually win elections, then there's no fraud. But when they lose elections, then it's fraud.
Same thing here.
We'll do two more questions. Two more questions, and then we'll move on to the communes.
What's the difference between the National Assembly and the Constituent Assembly?
The National Assembly is a permanent assembly in Venezuela. It's like the U.S. Senate. The Constituent Assembly is a temporary assembly, and it is designed to create legislation and basically rewrite the Constitution. Right now, Chavez, as you saw in the film, Chavez, as soon as he came into his presidency, he called for a National Constituent Assembly, which came together with activists, grassroots activists, intellectuals, educators. There were even business people also involved in writing the Constitution of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. That was in 1998, and it was approved. Sorry, 1999, and it was approved. In 2017, Maduro made the call for another Constituent Assembly to be formed. This was part of an effort in 2017. We're in the middle of very violent protests all throughout the country, and Maduro had called again and again and again, dialogue, let's sit down, let's talk. If things are this bad, if we're going to start killing each other in the streets, let's sit down and talk and see what we can do to make sure that there's peace in the country. So he called for the National Constituent Assembly as an opportunity for opposition to come in as well and help rewrite the Constitution. But also from the Chavista forces, it was seen as a possibility to put in the Constitution, because the Constitution of 1999, although it is a very humanist constitution, it does not reflect the socialist project that was now on the table in Venezuela. It opens the door and the possibility for the communes and the communal councils. However, that's not specifically stated within the Constitution. So for Chavismo, it meant the opportunity to actually put the communal councils and the communal state, the communes, as a part of the Constitution. So if in any case, if there was an opposition leader elected as president in Venezuela, there would at least be a constitutional backing that would remain. Because the first thing that the opposition did when they came into power, when they threw the coup in 2002, was dissolve every law that Chavez had been passed, take back every policy that had been passed during the Chavez administration. And of course, if they were to be elected as the political leaders in the country, they would actively work to do that. And the National Assembly, which has an opposition majority, when they came into power, one of the first laws that they tried to pass was privatizing the Gran Misión Venezuela, which is Gran Misión Vivienda Venezuela, which is the housing project that has provided homes to more than 2,500,000 Venezuelans who are in need of permanent housing. So, and also privatize urban lands, which has been a big struggle for many of the Venezuelans involved in the Bolivarian Revolution. The right to the city. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask what you think, why you think Guaido did this right now, at the time that he did. Like, was there any strategy involved in that? What's your take on why he's doing it right now?
I think Guaido, apart from being having a political mentor such as Leopoldo Lopez, who is an extreme right activist. He was also educated here in the United States. He went to George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and I think that he's also maintained in some ways many contacts with Washington, D.C. during his entire political career. And I think they saw the opportunity. He is a young candidate. Like I said, there's a lot of division in the opposition. They haven't been able to win elections, even though perhaps if they pulled together as a united coalition, perhaps they might actually win a democratic election. But because they lack that unity, they haven't been able to do so. So a lot of people are kind of disillusioned with a lot of the political figures of the opposition who have appeared again and again, and they're also, they kind of have their hands dirty from the coup of 2002. Everyone knows who they are, and they know what their political agenda is. Here's Guaido. He's young. He participated in the violent protests in 2017. He was in the streets during that time, so he brought kind of a different personality to it. And I think just the National Assembly has had a policy of changing every 3 months the president of the National Assembly, and it was his turn to come up. So I think that's, has something to do with it. Also, the economic sanctions have had a very heavy toll on the Venezuelan economy, and I think they just saw that it was an opportune moment to, the social structure in Venezuela has been very severely blasted by everything that's been going on. Is an opportune moment to go in. And it also has to do with Trump taking troops out of Syria and out of the Middle East, so now they have the possibility of having a military intervention in Venezuela. I believe that it has not happened before because troops were occupied elsewhere. But if they take the troops out of the Middle East, then there's a possibility of bringing those troops to the South American continent.
Sorry, just to add to that point, do you think they've also been emboldened by Bolsonaro?
I'm sorry?
Do you think they've also been emboldened by Bolsonaro? Like, would the fact that Brazil is, he's right next door?
It's been a chess game as well. There's also in the whole Latin American territory, there's been kind of a slow move to regain U.S. hegemony within the continent. When Chavez came to power, there was a moment in Latin American history when many of the countries in South America began to not take on socialist projects, and in some cases not even progressive, but at the very least begin having more ideas about sovereignty and about independence, nationalizing their national resources, like Ecuador, Bolivia, Argentina also rejected ALCA, the free trade agreement of the Americas. Lula in Brazil, though in Argentina and Brazil you couldn't really say they were extremely progressive governments, but they did have certain concepts of independence, of sovereignty, and certain social programs that hadn't existed there before. So there was a unity, and there was a different kind of hegemony within Latin America, which has little by little, starting with the coup in Honduras, starting with the overthrow of Zelaya in Honduras, and then Paraguay. Little by little, the United States has been regaining hegemony within all of Latin America. And Bolsonaro, now we have an extreme right government in Colombia, and there's an extreme right government in Brazil. So there's optimal conditions as well at this point in time for a military intervention. Last question.
Just to add to all that, it just seems like it's like a trying to go back to Operation Condor in the 1960s and 70s, where the CIA led opposition, right-wing dictatorships had power to suppress leftist socialist regimes, and it just seems like they're trying to retake that course of action again. Does it seem as though other neighboring countries besides, of course, Brazil and Colombia have stronger resistance to that kind of U.S. sanctioned coup? Or
the countries in Latin America who have spoken out against it, or Central America as well. Mexico hasn't had a very strong position, but at the very least they said they will not support any kind of United States intervention, and they have made a call for dialogue. Bolivia, Evo Morales is still in power there, and he's very much in support of the Bolivarian revolution and everything that it represents. Uruguay has also kind of maintained a relatively neutral policy towards that, but the majority of countries depend a lot on the United States, and Rex Tillerson's tour in 2017 and February of 2018 didn't help. From there, he was able to form an alliance called the Lima Group, which are most of the very strong U.S. allied countries and more rightist countries in Latin America that have begun to put a lot of political pressure on Venezuela, especially from the Organization of American States. So I just wanted to go on, we'll move on to the communes. The communes are a commune in Venezuela is a form of self-government. It, like I said, it has a law which supports it, the law of the communes, which was passed in 2010, and it's also based on the law of communal councils, which was passed in 2006. But these weren't things that were just invented or came out of the head of Chavez. It does bring in a lot of organizational concepts that come from China, with the communes in China, the rural communes in China. It brings in concepts from Oaxaca. It brings in concepts from Chiapas, from the Zapatistas, from the Commune of Paris, and also with the indigenous organization and early settler organizations in Venezuela as well. So it brings together a lot of different forms of organization and a lot of different ideologies to form something that is unique to Venezuela. They are territorial based. They do have a basis within a territory. So I live on this block, and I'm going to get together with 250 families from my block to form a communal council. The communal council is not like a city council. It doesn't have a chairman or a president. It doesn't have someone who resides over it or a group of people who make the decisions. But rather, it is based on spokespeople and working groups. So the majority of communal councils will have working groups like education, health, utilities, infrastructure, women and gender equality, food and distribution. And these working groups create projects and policies for their community in all of these areas. But they can't, it's not like an individual person or a group of people who make the decisions and then they just go and execute those projects, but rather it has to be approved by the Citizens Assembly, which is everyone. Everyone in the community has the right to participate. And there is a quorum, which is 60% of the community, because obviously you can't expect everyone to participate all the time. And all decisions are made from there. The communal councils and the communes do have the right to, once they have those projects made, if it's something that has to do with infrastructure, for example, and it needs financing, because the law exists, they can then apply their project to different institutions to receive financing. And that financing will go to a communal bank. Within the communal bank, that any kind of financing that enters into there will then be distributed to the projects that are created, and there is an expectation that communal councils and communes are self-sufficient. So while they're starting up, do receive financing from the state, the intention is to create as well productive projects or communally owned businesses which allow the communal council or the commune to be self-sufficient later on. So we can have a communally owned business. For example, the commune where I live, we have a block making factory, and we have a company for public transportation, 8 buses that do public transportation in the area. And any accident that comes from those, of course the workers are paid and everything else, but once any accident that comes in then goes to the communal bank, which can then be invested in any project in any one of these areas that we need it in. So the idea is for them to be, in one way or another, self-sufficient. one important thing about the communal councils and the communes as well is that it brings in another type of property which didn't exist before. Before there was private property and there's public property. When we say public property, it's property that belongs to the state. But with the communes and the communal councils, there's now communal property or collective property, something that belongs to the entire community. The community can decide what is done with it, or how it is executed, or how it is invested. So now we're talking about a whole different level of ownership. The communes are like a macro level of the communal council. So the communal council is 250 families within a geographical territory. And those geographical territories don't necessarily follow the traditional territories that exist, where lines are divided by municipalities, by state lines. A communal council can go over state lines. What binds us together, apart from being in the same geographical area, geographical meaning actual physical land, is also any kind of cultural ties that we might have, any kind of economic ties that we might have, and also any other kind of community projects that have bound us together historically. So for example, in a certain neighborhood, if we all share the same educational centers, if we all share the same hospital, if there's one certain area, specific area where there is a market where everyone goes to get food, that's going to be the geographical area where we're going to form our communal council, or our commune in this case. Communes are a macro level from the communal councils. You can have 6 communal councils that come together to form a commune, and it's based on the same principles of historical, cultural, and economic ties that bind us together to form the commune. The only difference in the commune and the communal council, besides being a macro level, is that instead of the citizens' assembly, you have the communal parliament, which does have one spokesperson from each communal council that come in, but that's the body that makes any of the decisions. However, the people who are in the parliament are not representatives; they are spokespeople. So any decision that is made in the parliament has to be approved in the citizens' assembly. So it creates a structure of direct participation for everyone within the community. And something, as I mentioned, something that is very important when we're talking about communes is the communal economy. The idea for the communal council, the idea is for the communal councils and the communes to be self-sufficient. So that means that there's a whole economic system of the communes that has to do with production, that goes all the way from production, storage, processing, distribution, and consumption. And all of that should be planned within the community. Part of the agenda right now with the communal movements is production, not just producing to produce, not just creating something to create it, but having sustainable agroecological and collective planification for production. When we're talking about storage, not using commercial storage, specifically because of what he mentioned about the hoarding, a lot of the corporations in private companies within Venezuela have actively participated, not just in the last 5 years, but historically during the entire Bolivarian revolution. The national companies would store their products, and they wouldn't release them into the street to create sabotage before elections, to create general chaos, and also price speculation. The situation of hyperinflation right now has a lot to do with a very fierce few years of hoarding that occurred in the year between 2014 and 2015, which then led to price speculation, massive price speculation later on. So the communes are working on a national level also to create storage spaces that are available and that are direct and indirect social property. The communal property of which I speak, the term in Venezuela is direct social property. When we talk about indirect, it's something that might belong partially to the state, but it is controlled by the communes. Creating plants for processing, distribution, and that distribution can also take the form. There are national networks for what is called trueque, which is kind of like bartering system. We interchange one product. In one commune, in a rural commune, they have corn, and in an urban commune, they have a factory where they produce animal feed. So the rural commune that produces corn brings their corn to the urban commune that has the factory that produces animal feed, and then that animal feed goes back to the rural commune. And also planned consumption. Planned consumption in order to give life and not living only just to consume. I'm going to put on 2 videos now from that I made with venezuelaanalysis.com. One of them is an urban commune called El Maizal, which is kind of a landmark commune on a national level. It's located in the state of Lara. Chavez actually went to the commune in Maizal to help inaugurate it. They are located on a large tract of land that was recuperated by the campesinos and then expropriated by the state and then given to the commune or not given, but it was given ownership by the commune in order to allow for them to have a productive project for their commune. And they have been very successful. They produce more than 4,000 tons of corn every year. That corn does get distributed through state-owned companies, but they also distribute it in their own community, and they have used the excedent from that corn production to finance electrification in their community, build roads, put in schools, and also invest in several other productive units. And they've been a very combative commune as well, historically in Venezuela. They're not afraid as well to criticize the state and also take responsibility in some areas where the state has failed. The second one is an urban commune, Commune Jose Pio de Mayo, which is also located in the state of Lara. The communes have thrived in the state of Lara because it is generally a very productive state in terms of agriculture, but also in terms of industrialized production. It's another commune. This time it's an urban commune, which have participated in the takeover of a Brazilian, a beer factory which belonged to a Brazilian transnational company called Brahma. So I will put on those videos and then we can talk some more about it if you have any questions.
I started the videos.
Half a mile down that way.
So before we get the video started, Mayday Books has allowed us to use this space to put on this event. They are a pillar of grassroots organizing in the Twin Cities. They support so many groups, so many projects, and the use of this kind of space doesn't always come cheap. There are operating costs to consider. So if you have a moment and a little bit of cash, I don't know, take like $10 out of your wallet and then put the rest in here. That'd be kind of ideal.
Something, I don't know.
While that's going around.
On March 5th, 2009, the national government expropriated 600 hectares of unproductive land in the municipality of Simón Planes in the state of Lara, which would soon become the heart of the commune El Maizal. The commune was organized that same year in response to former President Hugo Chávez's call to begin collectively producing the lands.
Antes que esto era de un terrateniente. Cuando llegó el comandante Chávez, inauguró la autopista, da la orden de que se expropie esto porque estos terrenos eran improductivos, únicamente los tenían engordando para venderlos más caros. Y entonces después que los recuperamos los pusimos productivos, tanto en maíz como en ganado.
Desde el 2010 estamos desarrollando proyectos agrícolas de manera colectiva, con una siembra comunal.
NYSA's first community-owned unit of corn production began producing more than 4,000 tons of corn per year and developed the capacity to invest in other areas of production, such as cattle for beef production, milk and cheese products, gas distribution, and a variety of vegetables which are distributed directly to the inhabitants of El Maizal and surrounding communities. Its agricultural production has also provided resources for the local communal economy, which have allowed the community to enact autonomous policies and implement social programs.
Nosotros, gracias a Dios, hemos comprendido que todo no es para gobierno, pues. Entonces nosotros mismos estamos produciendo para demostrar que desde el poder popular sí se pueden lograr las cosas. Donde Chávez nos dijo como una o nada, aquí le estamos demostrando al comandante que el sueño que tuvo y que tiene desde la edad del cielo se puede lograr. Y nosotros lo estamos logrando, construyendo desde la productividad, nosotros mismos autosustentando. Los excedentes van directamente al pueblo, a los 22 consejos comunales.
Nos encontramos ahorita en la quesera donde se realiza el queso, los cuales todos los días se realiza aproximadamente 30 kilos diarios, son distribuidos por consejos comunales en operativos de venta. El queso viene muy accesible, en precio solidario, es una red de la cual se trata de hacer un combo entre el queso, la carne, la hortaliza, todo lo que estamos produciendo aquí en el Maizal va directamente del productor al consumidor.
Estos excedentes han sido bien invertidos por el poder popular en todo lo que implica la producción y la reinversión social. Cuando hablo de producción, se podría resaltar las cosas que se han hecho dentro del predio e impulsar más que todo el ámbito de ganadería con la construcción de vaqueras, de queseras, sala de ordeño, mantener el predio como tal, su mantenimiento de potreros, mantenimiento de maquinaria y el atender al personal. El otro porcentaje es invertido en construcciones de cercas de escuelas. Se han hecho casas semilla para personas que no son beneficiadas por el Consejo Comunal a la hora de un proyecto de vivienda. De igual forma, los excedentes del maíz han servido para prestarle ayuda a esos pequeños productores que no son tomados en cuenta por las instituciones competentes, más que todo de la zona alta, para las siembras de hortalizas, tubérculos como cumo, papa. Y estos de igual forma arriman parte de la producción al predio y nosotros a su vez lo pasamos a las personas que no producen y que necesitan de este mismo rubro. También es importante resaltar que los productores del predio, los que hacen vida y hacen posible esta siembra, son bastante beneficiados con esto, ya que ellos no solamente se les cancela su incentivo por el trabajo que hacen, sino que también se le dan sus bonificaciones por útiles escolares, sus bonificaciones en diciembre, sus bonificaciones por enfermedad.
Productive communes such as El Maizal have found that the communal model liberates them from state bureaucracy and corruption that can plague institutions. In the commune, decisions are made in assembly to guarantee the collective well-being, and the use of resources must be publicly scrutinized.
Una de las grandes diferencias que tiene la comuna organizada, el poder popular organizado, es el manejo o la ejecución de los recursos que entran a la comuna del Maizal. ¿En qué sentido? Porque cada recurso que entra a la comuna se hace contraloría, poder popular, se le hacen contraloría a los 22 consejos comunales, todas esas personas que habitan, cualquier persona puede hacer auditoría.
Podemos dejar ver que primero se humaniza, ¿no? Se humaniza el trabajo, se valora al ser humano y se pone por encima de todo. Lo segundo, que las tierras se ponen totalmente productivas. El trabajo productivo es indispensable y casi que clave dentro de una comuna para la sustentabilidad de la misma, ¿no?
As the recent recent financial war and economic downturn worsened in Venezuela. Participation in many communes and popular organizations declined. In contrast, El Maizal became more organized and combative, pushing forward what would appear to be the objective laid out by Chavez in his last speeches, the communal state as the point of no return for the revolution. This has implied two things for El Maizal: the creation of links with other communes and taking over means of production that have been left idle. In several cases, this has meant takeovers of failed state-owned companies. In 2014, El Maizal took over 12 greenhouses belonging to the Venezuelan Food Corporation, Ceval, which were left abandoned for at least 7 years.
Ellos hicieron la construcción de todo esto, tuvieron por un lapso de 7 años. Así como ellos lo construyeron, se vio deteriorarse todo porque no lo pusieron a producir como Estado. Entonces nosotros como Comunal asumimos las riendas, tomamos esto, nos empoderamos de estos medios de producción, pues, y ahora que se le está viendo el avance. Aquí por lo menos ven algunas casas que están deterioradas, bueno, vamos con lo mismo que se ha producido aquí, se va reparando. Nosotros sí cambiamos algunos techos, hicimos muchas reparaciones de tuberías y empezamos a trabajar. Pero cuando la mantuvo la empresa del Estado nunca produjeron nada.
The greenhouses are now being gradually repaired and used for cultivation of tomatoes, peppers, and other vegetables. In June of 2017, the workers of the state-owned pork processing company, Porcinos del Alba, solicited the support of the commune in Maizal to take over the plant after having faced administrative abandonment. Without resources or animal feed, the conditions on the site were disastrous.
Esto, compatriota, esto queda tomado desde este momento,
Era una empresa del Estado, Porcino del Alba, viendo la necesidad de exploración que tenía la empresa y la mala asistencia a los trabajadores. Ellos se vieron en la obligación de llamarnos a nosotros, la Comunal Maizal, para que viniéramos a ver qué posibilidad habría de ayudarlos en el rescate de dicha empresa, pues ya que una empresa que tiene capacidad de 6.000 animales, lo cual contara con menos de 600 animales en unas condiciones totalmente deplorables. Cada día se morían más de 50 animales y bueno, ellos en vista de que estaban a punto de perder su empleo ya y la empresa como tal, se vieron en la necesidad de acudir a nosotros como comuna, lo cual cuando vimos la realidad de la empresa, bueno, no dudamos en tomar de forma bastante organizada con los consejos comunales, la Comuna de Maizal y conjuntamente con los trabajadores, con su apoyo. Aquí estamos pues sacando esta empresa adelante. Hoy en día ya se ha recuperado, se le ha invertido algunos recursos provenientes de la comuna y estamos levantándola poco a poco y esperamos que algún día también el Estado nos apoye en esto, porque estamos contribuyendo con la soberanía alimentaria del país. Ya se han sacado algunas ventajas hacia el pueblo, que se han beneficiado directamente al pueblo a través de los cracks. Eliminamos toda esa cadena de intermediarios, ahora del productor al pueblo directamente.
Following a slow but apparently successful recovery of the Porcinos del Alba plant, and Maizal was again asked to lead the takeover of an experimental productive facility belonging to the state-owned but opposition-controlled Midwestern University Lisandro Alvarado. According to local farmers and the few remaining workers, the facility has been in a situation of abandon for almost 8 years due to the university administration's alleged lack of resources. But El Maizal says the facility should have no need for continued state financing, given its diverse productive capacity in the areas of cattle, dairy, poultry, fish, and vegetable production, as well as food processing and storage.
El día 17 de octubre del año 2017, en vista de los acontecimientos que están sucediendo aquí en la UCLA, la comunidad solicitó a la Comuna del Maizal, ¿verdad?, ese apoyo para que se viniera a hacer esta toma, ya que aquí en estas instalaciones se estaban presentando frecuentemente robos, totalmente una desidia en todas las instalaciones, las vacas, todo lo que tiene que ver con los vacunos se estaba perdiendo. En vista de esta situación, la Comuna del Maizal, conjuntamente con la comunidad, toma las instalaciones para hacer un rescate de toda todas estas áreas que deberían estar productivas. Los piensos que están aquí es primeramente recuperar una raza de un ganado lechero, una raza carora. Estamos en este momento haciendo mantenimiento a los potreros, ya que el monte sobrepasa todo el pasto, los animales no tienen, ya se aproxima el verano. Estamos haciendo también un estudio para meter también la cría de pollo, la cría de cachama, algunos tipos de leguminosa, hortaliza, todo lo que tiene que ver con el plátano, la yuca. Bueno, sacar adelante todo el provecho de todo este potencial que está aquí en esta infraestructura.
In less than 3 months since the occupation of the university facilities, the El Maizal commune has managed to recuperate 15 dairy cows and increase milk production from 30 to 90 liters per day, as well as reactivate tractors and other abandoned machinery. They hope to have fully recuperated the poultry pavilion with more than 600 chickens for meat and egg production by the end of February.
Vamos adelante y que la ciudad comunal se haga realidad.
El Maizal and the communes of Simon Planas have intensified their bottom-up organization, beginning the new year with a series of assemblies to discuss the creation of at least 3 communal confederations to consolidate an alternative to Venezuela's traditional municipalities based on popular power, self-government, and community-run production. They are confident that their efforts will lead to new levels of organization, autonomy, production, and sustainability for their territories. The commune in Maizal is actually, we're going to watch one more, it's short. The commune in Maizal, just to give you an idea, actually stretches over 2 states. It doesn't take up the entire states, but because the state lines were not made by the people, they were made by political powers with economic and political interests. They have nothing to do with the reality of the people. So there are people on one side of the state, in the state of Lara, and people on the other side of the border in the state of Portuguesa, but they have economic ties, they have the same kind of agricultural production, they have the same educational centers, they've depended on the same economic centers, so they came together to form the commune in Maizal. And right now they are forming a communal municipality. The idea with the communal councils and the communes is to eventually arrive to a communal state, which means at some point in the future, if the communes are able to keep going, the communes will then come together to form these communal municipalities and then form communal cities. When there is a communal city, there's no need for mayor. When there is a communal state, there's no need for governors. And the idea is to keep building on this structure until you have a communal, instead of a national assembly, an actual communal parliament. So there's a direct democracy all the way from the bottom up and the top to the bottom.
The month of March marked the 4th year anniversary of the worker occupation of the installations of the Brahma beer plant, located in Barquisimeto in the state of Lara, Venezuela, which after 2 years of resistance has transformed into the communally owned company Proletarios Unidos of the Comunal José Pío Tamayo, where it has had 2 more years of growth with local and national impact towards a sovereign economy in the hands of popular power. This is their story.
Brahma Venezuela anunció recientemente el inicio al proceso para el cese de operaciones, que Brahma es una popular cerveza brasileña de la empresa Ambev.
El 18 de marzo del 2013, la empresa, producto de una gran transnacional que domina el mercado no solamente en Latinoamérica, sino Europa, deciden prescindir de los servicios de todos los trabajadores de manera radical e irrevocable.
Aquí estamos un grupo de trabajadores haciendo una denuncia formal acerca de la situación laboral que estamos viviendo desde el pasado 18 de marzo de este año, cuando los directivos de la compañía Brahma Venezuela mediante una asamblea inusual, nos informan a los más de 360 trabajadores que hacíamos vida para ese momento aquí en la planta, el cierre de las operaciones acá en el país y que por siguiente comenzaba también un proceso de liquidación dentro del Ministerio del Trabajo Pedro Pascual Abarca, cosa que nosotros no aceptamos.
Por un lado, manifestaba de que no había condiciones de trabajo, dejando materia prima, dejando producción y las máquinas en óptimas condiciones para seguir la producción. Producto de estas contradicciones, obligó a los obreros a profundizar en un proceso de investigación y evaluar y dar al traste con la real posición de la empresa. Era que el 20 de octubre del 2010, la empresa transnacional AMBEV, Comunal Internacional InBev, gestionan o acuerdan, violando lo que establece el artículo 113 en nuestra Constitución de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela, violando el no al monopolio. Eso nos impulsó a nosotros a organizarnos y a dar una batalla incansable en la defensa de la integridad de los trabajadores. Organizamos el Consejo de Obreros, donde planteábamos las políticas necesarias para el resguardo y la vigilancia permanente de la planta. Más adelante, el 14 de mayo del 2014, decidimos, producto de la falta de respuesta de algunos miembros de los organismos del Estado, a dar respuesta a los trabajadores, nos llevó a la transformación de buscar al movimiento popular y enmarcarnos en una estructura de estudio permanente de lo que establece la ley de economía comunal, ya que la ley de las comunas dan prioridad al nacimiento de una empresa de propiedad social directa comunal donde los trabajadores buscan el movimiento popular y al campesino pobre para articular y profundizar en el trabajo mancomunado.
Ya no somos trabajadores de Brahma, somos propietarios de la empresa socialista Propietarios Unidos y a la mano con la comuna Pío Tamayo. Ya nosotros en esta fase que estamos, en este nuevo nivel que tenemos, ya nos sentimos dueños junto con la comunidad de esta empresa. Pues con todo obrero, porque nosotros y la comuna somos la diferencia en este país.
Después de esta participación que hemos adquirido, no puede pasar desapercibido el proyecto de agua potable.
Nosotros obtenemos una medida cautelar por un tribunal agroalimentario. Desde ese momento que nos dan, venimos trabajando de manera tranquila, ya que hace un tiempo atrás la policía de acá del Estado nos acechaba y no nos dejaba hacer nuestra labor social, ya que la hidrológica del Estado no cumple su obligación, que es llevar el agua a diferentes comunidades. Nosotros sí lo hacemos. Venimos haciendo un trabajo con los pequeños productores que son patios productivos de siembra de hortalizas, cría de cochinos, de ovejos, de chivos, de gallinas, el cual nosotros llevamos una programación directa a estos productores totalmente gratuita. Aparte de estos productores, nosotros también le damos el agua totalmente gratuita a diferentes comunidades de muy bajos recursos, también a escuelas, a CDI, Seguro Social, al Core 4, la Guardia Nacional, a la Sodilara, la base aérea, y diferentes instituciones de acá del Estado.
Bueno, esto tiene su origen aproximadamente hace 2 años, lo que son los patios productivos, pues, enmarcados en lo que es la agricultura urbana y crear conciencia en los socioproductores, producir lo que vamos a consumir y no estar dependiendo, porque lamentablemente pues, el sistema capitalista nos inculcó eso, pues, la dependencia de que solamente unos pocos sembraban y la mayoría consumía. Aquí sustentamos este desarrollo del patio productivo con el punto objetivo del Plan de la Nación, que es mantener el medio ambiente o preservar el medio ambiente para generaciones futuras. Utilizamos solamente bioinsumos, los cuales son el humo de lombriz, el sulfo cálcico, el biol. Todo primero lo estamos produciendo también aquí en este estado.
En el año 2016 fue un año de excelente reto para la clase obrera y el movimiento popular. Producto de la escasez, del atropello, de la arremetida en contra del proceso revolucionario y el presidente de la República, Nicolás Maduro, los obreros, el pueblo organizado y el sector campesino sale a la palestra y a la defensa en la acción y profundización del proceso productivo
de alimento, en este caso para animales.
A partir del mes de julio del año 2016, nosotros tuvimos la idea de producir alimentos para animales. Hicimos una reingeniería y la capacidad que tiene esta empresa como vecino y muchas maquinarias que podíamos usarla para la producción y darle un vuelco diferente a lo que era cerveza.
Estamos aprovechando todo el potencial que tiene el propietario privado de construir su alimento para aves, cerdos, para ganado lechero. Y todo el Estado está produciendo unidades de producción, en este caso de gallinas pondedoras. Una relación orgánica, una relación política. Nos interesa la organización del pueblo para que pueda producir los alimentos desde el propio pueblo y hacer paz al pueblo. Solo el pueblo habla de paz.
Hemos dado crear nuestro propio centro de acopio para llevarle a la distribución a la comunidad todo lo que sea a precio justo. La relación del productor con el centro de acopio es el trueque, que son los que arriban para acá lo que es la carne porcina, la carne bovina. Nosotros le vendemos el alimento y ellos nos dan el 20% de distribución para nosotros distribuírselo a la comunidad con el cerdo, para abastecer a nuestra comunidad, a nuestro pueblo, para desbaratar la guerra económica, que sea a nivel nacional, que los productos al deber de llegar a la parte de mercabar, que lleguen aquí a nuestro sitio, a nuestro centro de acopio, aquí donde está la comunidad y a nuestras comunidades.
En el futuro aspiramos una empaquetadora, que ya la tenemos casi lista, una avanzada con las líneas de producción de embotelladora, un plan de siembra que nos puede servir como arranque para el abastecimiento de nuestra planta de maíz amarillo, sin depender del Estado ni de cualquier otro ente que no seamos nosotros, que seamos autosustentables en todo lo que es el transitar de nuestra empresa como tal.
Empresa de propiedad social directa comunal Proletarios Unidos. 4 años de lucha, de resistencia y de avanzada dentro del proceso revolucionario.
Aquí en Proletarios Unidos estamos construyendo un nuevo modelo económico, productivo y social.
Entre el poder comunal, los trabajadores y las trabajadoras rompemos con la lógica burguesa del capitalismo.
Estamos organizando una producción soberana. Esto es nuestro socialismo. Este es nuestro socialismo.
Esto es el legado de Chávez.
Todos y todas aquí tenemos que ver con eso. Es parte del alma de este proyecto. Nos cabe una gran responsabilidad ante la historia. Independencia o nada. Comuna o nada.
Are there any questions about the communes or in general?
I want to know how common the communes are in comparison to the country as a whole. Like how often, how many there are, how much of the country they have.
There are currently 3,000 registered communes on a national level, which certainly doesn't cover more than 30% of the national territory. But also there's been a lot of backlash from the right. Of course, the economic sanctions and the current economic situation has gravely affected the capacity of communities to organize themselves. About 80% of the country is organized in communal councils that have a lot more impact, and that's in poorer communities and wealthier communities. Everywhere you will find a communal council because everything from housing, utilities, everything is organized right now through the communal councils. Communes have been a little bit more complicated because it does require a lot more initiative from the community and a lot more organizational capacity. And you know that has been it's been a large process to push forward the communes. I think even within Chavismo, there's not, especially with those who are in, a lot of people who work within the government, within Chavismo, have had also a backlash against the communes, because once you're in power, you have power, and it's hard to let go of that. And what really the proposal of the communes in the communal state is socializing power. Everyone has the right to participate. So it hasn't been a completely hegemonic, even though it is definitely part of the Bolivarian revolution, and it is the horizon for many people who are within the Bolivarian revolution. There isn't a hegemonic view of what the communes are or what they should be. So it's been a kind of a dialectic process that hasn't allowed it to advance extremely rapidly. Any other questions?
I was wondering, they briefly mentioned in the video some of the food that they were producing was being distributed through CLAP. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the relationship between the communes and CLAP and how that works.
The CLAP are local committees for nutrition or food distribution and production. It was something that was formed, it's a new figure that was formed in 2015, 2016 as a direct response to the situation of economic warfare. Before the economic sanctions, the state has provided a lot of state-subsidized food through the Mercal program, especially in the poor communities where people would have problems accessing a weekly market. They would have access to the Mercal, which are kind of like grocery stores, but with subsidized food, and they would have. And anyone can go to a Mercal. It wasn't something that was limited to one sector of the population or another. But since most of that food was imported, the Mercals slowly kind of disappeared, and then the CLAPs were another kind of response. It is government subsidized, they do distribute government subsidized food, but in the case of the CLAP, it's to everyone in the community. Everyone goes into a census in their communal councils, and when the government subsidized food arrives, they're given every single family, house to house, are given a box of that food. They are called committees of food distribution and production because they should have an element of production. Unfortunately, most of them do not have an element of production. There are a few examples, and if you look at the Venezuela Analysis website, we do have an example of one of the CLAP that have had a wonderful organizational process within the community, integration in the community, and are also working on urban agriculture. But those examples are not, I wouldn't say it's the standard, it's the exception. But that is the concept of them. And it's to allow, a lot of the CLAPs have gone beyond just the distribution of government subsidized food. Many of them also have made those direct contact with different factories and with farmers in the countryside, and are bringing that food into the community and also distributing that. We have, in the state of Lara, we have farmers who are producing peppers and are producing plantains and are producing different kinds of tubers. So we go to the countryside, we collect money within our community. We go to the countryside, we buy those products directly from the farmers, who usually have to go through intermediaries who go to the countryside, and they pay the farmers a miserable price, and then they bring them to the city and they sell them at 10 times what they paid the farmer for. So instead, the CLAPs go directly to the countryside. They buy those products directly from the farmers, and then they distribute them within their community at a reasonable price for the community. And sometimes it's with the CLAP, but the communal councils and the communes also participate in a lot of networks of distribution, just the same. Any other questions? Well, I want to thank you. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. I forgot. I didn't have an intervention.
Yeah. So before we move on a little bit with the program, you should already have in your hands, that have been passed around, some flyers for an event on March 17th. The main Venezuela correspondent for Fight Back News will be here at Mayday Books on March 17th to talk to us about the U.S. coup in Venezuela from a Marxist perspective. I'm super excited for it, and I really hope to see you all there. In addition, we have a petition that I'm going to be passing around. we are going to call on our senators to join Representative Ilhan Omar in voicing opposition to U.S. efforts to force regime change in Venezuela. So I'm going to go ahead and start this right here. And then we have one more event coming up.
CJ's got it.
I have it. I'll present it.
Oh, fantastic.
I got you. I'll pull it.
Thank you. So that actually leads into the next part of this program. We have a member of the Anti-War Committee to talk about the current situation in Venezuela, how it's been developing extremely rapidly in the past few months. I would like to present my good friend, Cullen McCormick, to talk to you all about it.
We're after the pro-war committee. Alright.
They don't need a committee, they have the government.
So the two angles that I want to emphasize in talking about this most recent coup attempt are privatization on a global scale and the racial dynamics within Venezuela. With the angles of privatization, you hear a lot about how the Venezuelan economy is a one-trick pony, how it heavily relies upon oil exports, how when the price of oil fell in 2014, 2015, everything just kind of came tumbling to a halt. But that's very ironic, because what the IMF and the World Bank want every country to do as a precondition for accepting their for getting those loans is they want them to privatize all their national industries. They typically push land reform that favors concentration into the hands of very rich elites, as they do in Brazil, as they did all across Africa. They want the country to find its quote-unquote comparative advantage and begin exporting that almost exclusively. If you look at the economy in Nigeria, 90% of its exports are between petroleum and gasoline. And, you know, Nigeria, no one ever talks about how Nigeria is an example of failing capitalism. It is absolutely a petroeconomy that totally halts, screeches to a halt whenever the price of oil dips, which, by the way, is very beneficial to the US. Prices of oil is one of our main inputs, and we depend upon it being cheap to keep our economy functioning as well as it does, which is of course disastrous for many countries in the periphery. And what the National Assembly under Guaido has tried to do multiple times is to privatize Venezuelan oil, to re-privatize it, which they can't do because the Constitution is written in such a way that it protects against them, and they have been in contempt of the court since 2015. So it's not something that they have the power to do, but it's something they very badly want to do, as you can hear John Bolton talking about with developing the oil capacities in Venezuela. And a big part of this is the class dynamics and the clash between the lower class Venezuelans, the poorer Venezuelans, the working class, and the rich Venezuelans. And what they don't tell you in the US media is that richer Venezuelans are also whiter Venezuelans. They are very much allied with racial supremacy. They typically would depict Chavez as a literal monkey when he was in power. They would draw pictures of him drawn like an ape because he's an Afro-Venezuelan. And a lot of the poorer Venezuelans are indigenous and Afro-Venezuelans. And they're the ones who get lynched whenever the right incites these huge mobs against people. And it so deftly highlights the hypocrisy of people like Hillary Clinton and Amy Klobuchar, who claim to be anti-racist and who claim to be pro-feminist and who support these movements of actual fucking lynch mobs against indigenous colonized peoples. And it's all because they want this privatization of Venezuelan resources, which hasn't worked for any other economy in the world that has tried it or has been forced to try it and give up their food self-sufficiency, which is a huge part of what those communes are about. And that's why they're so significant. Because real democratic change and self-sufficiency, you can't do it if you can't feed yourself. And the fact that Venezuelans are developing the capability to feed themselves drives the IMF and the World Bank and the United States insane. They hate it so much. And so you also have to realize that Venezuela has been accepting aid from China and Russia and for pretty much any country that's not actively looking to overthrow it. And that the aid that was being pushed through on the Colombian border on a bridge, which by the way was never opened, was never part of Venezuela's infrastructure, also contained barbed wire and ammunitions because it got burned. They poked through it afterwards and they found it. And it was a pittance compared to the wealth that the U.S. has stolen through sanctions, and a pittance compared to the wealth that the communes themselves have been able to produce, and a pittance compared to the aid that China and Russia have been sending into Venezuela. It's completely laughable. And, you know, if any of, I guess I'll open up questions. I'm trying to be very brief, trying to be legible. Does anyone have a question for me, or are we going to move on to something else?
Well, I see that people are kind of getting up and anxious to go, but before, unless there are other questions, before everyone leaves, I just wanted to say that also Venezuela has been going through a blackout for the last 3 days, which is no small thing. It has been a nationwide blackout, which affects mostly the elderly and people who are in the hospital. It is a question of survival for so many people having access to light. It is something that has been caused by a cyber attack. We believe the United States is involved. Mike Pompeo immediately took advantage of the situation to say no food, no fuel, no light, no electricity, no Maduro. Marco Rubio, the United States Republican senator in Florida, tweeted last week that Venezuela will soon run out of food and fuel. And 2 minutes after the blackout happened, he immediately was on Twitter announcing that the blackout had happened. How he can get confirmed in 2 minutes when Venezuela is in a blackout that is really the situation, and that it is a nationwide blackout, and that the backup generators in Venezuela did not function, I don't know. But there's obviously a connection. Juan Guaido began tweeting today, demanding that the military rise up and throw a coup, otherwise they will not stop the attacks. So you tell me who is responsible for that situation. And he has also said time and time again that Venezuelan lives are no cost for the objectives that they have put before them, which is regime change. So it is very important, and I encourage all of you to talk to your senators, support Ilhan Omar, which is she's one of the few United States representatives who has stood up against U.S. intervention in Venezuela. I might have some differences with her and some of her discourse about Venezuela, because she still speaks of authoritarian regime or the need for democratic change. I do see the reality in Venezuela is very different, but I admire and I appreciate her willingness to stand up in front of the United States House of Representatives and speak her position and speak against United States imperialism and question Elliot Abrams, who is the ambassador from the United States to bring on this humanitarian aid from the United States into Venezuela. He is an international war criminal who was involved in the Contras in Nicaragua, is responsible and has covered up millions of deaths in Latin America and Central America in the 1980s and 1990s, and he has an obvious agenda as well with Venezuela. So I do encourage you to take action, look for alternative sources, and talk to your senators, talk to your representatives. And I know the Anti-War Coalition or Committee, has made a lot of effort here in Minneapolis to have street protests and make a presence within the community. And I just wanted to mention as well, I have here a sign-up sheet for anyone who's interested in signing up for the newsletter for Venezuela Analysis. We do have a delegation that is going out on the 14th of May to Venezuela. We organize 1 to 2 delegations a year, so if you are interested in going on a delegation or having more information about Venezuela, please do sign up for our newsletter, because we get out the information through our weekly newsletter. And I also have copies of the documentary here if you're interested for a $10 suggested donation. If you don't have the $10, don't worry about it, but if you want a copy of the documentary, Venezuela Bolivariana, it is available here.
Awesome. And I just wanted to close out, on the 15th, Friday, March 15th at 5:30, we're protesting in front of Klobuchar's office for a number of reasons, partly for Venezuela, partly to defend BDS, and to end U.S. sanctions, and to end U.S. sanctions against Venezuela, and to enact sanctions against Israel. So I will be passing around these flyers for everybody's convenience. Yes, Misty?
Can we just say thank you to Sridhar for coming in?
Yeah.